hear my voice on microphone. It sounds terrible on microphone. So the best is I will use my real voice and talking to you. First, I would like to thank Dr. Donna and Rob Kudesa to give me a chance here to provide you some of my knowledge on the Chinese communities, business community in Vietnam, so that we have a comparative perspective when we say comparing Singapore and Vietnam, because in Singapore is kind of an exception where Chinese formed the majority and later on Singapore became on its own to be an independent country. That's very different from the rest of Southeast Asia and around the world. Yeah, so I'd like to start right now. Yeah, for the first slide you see something interesting in the slide. I'll show you. What is? That's grape wine, French wine. And these are not the very traditional Chinese businessmen. They are the one who dealing with the French. And their shop is not in the Chinatown, but on the most fancy street on the shopping area of the French town. Yeah. And I pick it up, it's very hard because we rarely see any pictures of the Chinese merchants or traders without opium. This is a very rare one. Yeah. And you'll see later like all those with opium. Okay. Time to start. To those of you who like any kind of background of like Indochina or Vietnamese history, I would like to show you a map. You see, the first map would be the colonization of Southeast Asia, no, of Indochina and other parts like Burma and British Malaya. And you will see here, the first part, this is Vietnam, right? And focus here, this part, Cochin, China. This is the southern part of Vietnam, which we will mention a lot during the section because most of the Chinese businesses in Vietnam focus there, they stay there, and they became the hub for a whole network that's spanning through the 3 countries of Indochina to Siam, British Malaya, and all the way to Taiwan, Japan, etc. And this is one of the propaganda poster of the French government when they say, okay, we are doing great things in Vietnam, and this is La Cochin, the southern part. And you see here, remember, just take in your mind these pictures of a guy with 2 buffaloes, right here. Why they promote such a picture, such a depiction of the place right here. And this is roughly the place. And I'd like to show you, this is the major waterways in the big rivers. The Mekong come all the way from China to form the Mekong Delta here and other waterways. This is just the major rivers, not mentioning the canals. And it play a major, very important role in trades. We will see later on. Okay. As elsewhere in Southeast Asia, the Chinese diaspora is not a very new phenomenon. But in Vietnam, it's particularly very old. It's not count by 100 years, but by 1,000 years. And it dated back from the time that Vietnam claimed its independence from China. In 10th century, some Chinese state, they remained there. And later on, with the clash between the Vietnamese court and the Chinese court during the Song Dynasty, Yuan Dynasty, and Ming Dynasty. Each of these incidents and these invasions draw in quite a number of amount of the Chinese people into Vietnam. However, the Chinese community that we know today, with their history, can dated only from the beginning of the Qing dynasty in China. As we know that with the fall of Ming dynasty, a large numbers of Ming loyalists migrated outside of China with the fall of the Nanming dynasty later on after the fall of Beijing and the fall of Taiwan to Kangxi Emperor. And I listed here, there's two big groups of Chinese military men and their families that came to Vietnam and formed the settlements there. They were very well received at that moment. especially in South Vietnam. Because at that time, Vietnam was divided into the North and the South with the warlords, like the two warlords from the two clans that fought each other. So the one in the South were the new, and they needed men. And Chinese men proved to be not capable of military, as military men, but also with their trading ability, their trading talents. And we see like all of those, their settlements in South Vietnam at that time, whenever they stopped, they form a town. And whenever they found a town, they do trading with anything that they could find in local place. And because mostly they were military men, there was no women. And that's why they need to assimilate with the local people and form a group that we call, like you see here, Minh Hương, Minh Xiang. This Xiang is the village. Originally it's like Xiang Cao, Xiang Ai. But later on, they changed it into like village because they don't want to, the Vietnamese court didn't want to upset the Qing court in China by saying that the Ming Dynasty is so fragrant. But they changed it into a village. Yes. And these people, if you read about the Peranakan, these people are something like that. They are assimilated with local women, give birth to children, and for the second generation and third generation, they became almost Vietnamese. But they still keep their Chinese tradition, especially in trade. And before the French came, as I show here, there were approximately less than 100,000 people, Chinese people in South Vietnam. That's quite a significant number when we compare up the population at the time of roughly like several millions. That's quite a lot, and almost all of them doing trade. We have learned during this module that the network of the Chinese, when they go overseas, here we see almost the same phenomena with the formation of temples of Bang and Hui Guan for like mutual assistantship. This temple I'm showing you here was built during the 18th century, once now laying in the heart of Ho Chi Minh City, Chinatown, and the others is from central Vietnam. You can see Hu Chien Hui Guan, right? Yes. That's pretty old. And they function in almost the same way. And we see a persistent and a common characteristic of Chinese networks in Southeast Asia, no matter in Singapore or in Vietnam. Even before the colonial period, Chinese merchants or traders held monopolies in a variety in the various industries. As I shown here, they monopolized in foreign trade, gold extracting, keeping, and trading. Because gold was exclusively used for foreign trade with the Portuguese, with the Dutch, because the laws were in war, so they need weapons, they need Western technology, and the only thing that they could give the Western partly spies, but mostly gold. And the Chinese held the monopoly of gold in Vietnam. In South Vietnam, it was very turbulent toward the end of 18th century. And the new rebels, there was a peasant rebels. And actually, they really hated the Chinese merchants to say, okay, you guys are rich people and rip off our Vietnamese all things. So they held very much of hatred toward Chinese community. And let me show here, in late 19th century, they moved to the area that we know today as Gia Lớn, or the big city, and with the Chinese character, this Cantonese is playing on, which means like on the bank of the river or canal. and this temple belonged to them. It's partially explained why the Chinese follow these rebels' opponents, the founder of the last dynasty of Vietnam, and I show here the Nguyen dynasty. And the Minh Hương or the Minh Xiang, they not only like prominent traders, but only formidable military leaders. They formed their own militia. They joined with the Lord, and they fought the rebel to protect their communities, their trading communities. And it's partly because of that reason, after the establishment of the dynasty, they received tremendous privileges from the court, which we see which make them like have monopolies or dominance in the various fields of the economies, including exemption tax for new immigrants, operation of shipyard and industrial handicraft facilities. This is very important because the Vietnamese could not do that. They were not allowed to do that for making big ships. They could not go seafaring. And industrial handicraft lied almost exclusively in Chinese hands during the first part of the 19th century. And they would receive the ownership of land. This is very important because usually foreigners could not own much of land, but they were granted the right to own land and establish their own kind of plantation. Not that much, but revenue farming is another aspect. And these policies encourage more immigrants to the countries. And in the north of Vietnam, they always receive monopolies in mining. 120 mines in 19th century in Vietnam laid in the hand of the Chinese. Not a single one of the Vietnamese people, one or two with the court, but if it's civil, it's Chinese mines. And we take very close attention to mining. You will see a change later. Does it look familiar? Just like the cartoon that we give you, with the going down and the river and all the junk here. Does it look familiar? This is the sense of the Chinese area in Saigon, Chợ Lớn area during the later part of colonial period. Roughly the same. And I will explain you why. It's not only the same with the phenomenon, but the landscape is all. As we know that, the whole part of Vietnam became French colonies right from the 1860s. And, excuse me, at this point, we witnessed the new, huge, and tremendous influx of new Chinese immigrants into the colonies. It was because, firstly, the turbulence in China, as we know, with the Taiping Rebellion,